The immediate negotiation process that we embark on is an immediate negotiation out of press freedom and out of media freedom. And this is something that the Zimbabweans are probably going to tell you where you meet them. They say, no, Congress, be careful, because the government first, the Zimbabwean government started talking to us, saying, no, don't worry, we really have the best interests at heart. And they would use things like training, ethics, you know, and then we have the ministry coming in, and so direct interference in the enjoyment of the right of citizens to express themselves and the right of the media to be free. So to conclude, given the fact that I have 5 minutes, and should you have further questions, please go ahead and ask. To conclude, it is a dangerous process, a dangerous new dispensation that we find ourselves in, where governments are beginning to ask us to debate regulation of the media. It basically means they want to take away media freedom. Yes, we must negotiate. Yes, there will be issues about compromises, but make sure you stand firm on principle. And this particular principle, which we must not give you now, is media freedom via self-regulation.
Thank you very much. And then Mr. Lantau has joined us, and we'll give him 2 minutes, and he will speak from the floor.
Good afternoon. When I got the invitation here, firstly it was not about this topic, and later towards the conference then it was about this topic, and then I was asked to defend statutory regulation. I asked myself, why me? I assume, and I think I hope I'm correct, that it's because I have served the country as a commissioner, councillor of an independent regulator for about 8 years. So I hope that was the rationale. Now, I think the panel has spoken to the history and why we are here. And perhaps I need to correct my Kabano from Zim. But I think the contexts are very different. But I note the point you are making. But indeed, the jurisdictions, the context is very different. I think why in South Africa we came to where we are, it was a increasingly challenging matter of decline in the quality of journalism, professionalism, non-compliance to the press code. And that clearly is not what we should be aspiring towards. So clearly, as the media, we prescribe the press code, and we therefore need to comply to our own press code. I prepared a paper based on a number of questions I was asked in terms of the angle that I was asked to come in. But I hope the organizers will circulate the paper. I'm not going to talk to it. I'll just focus now to then why the proposal of a statutory system does need consideration. Firstly, I think we do need to appreciate that in the South African context, which is a constitutional democracy, we have quite a lot of pieces of law, starting from the Constitution itself, right through to laws that regulate broadcasting, laws that are administered in the interest of all the media, print and broadcasting and electronic media, like the MDDA Act. And if you go into the body of those laws, you will find in those laws from the Constitution that there is no debate about freedom of the media, freedom of expression, access to information for all, not for a few, for all citizens. There is no debate, and I do not believe that South Africa will move the direction that my Kabane is suggesting at all. There is jurisprudence reinforcing this. In the paper, I referred to a number of judgments, talking to different cases that relate to protection of independence, which is enshrined in laws. You also in South Africa have a number of these independent bodies established by law, ranging from the Independent Electoral Commission, Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, Commission for Gender Equality, Human Rights Commission, MDDA, a number of them, independent bodies, protected, their independence is clearly defined and protected in law. And then there is jurisprudence, wherein such independence was under threat, where there is pronouncements by courts in defense of that independence. So that is the framework and the context in South Africa, my comrade, which clearly is not the direction that you were talking to. Then I think it was very interesting and I think good that in South Africa we've been able to come to some sort of convergence. At the beginning there was, I suspect, a lot of mistrust of what was the proposals for. But I think where we are now is Wamre have referred to the Press Council review. Then there is the Press Freedom Commission report. Unfortunately, it's no longer available online. I don't know why. But if you look at those reports, they began to address the concerns that were raised by a number of people, not just the state. There were submissions from a number of people affected by reports that are inaccurate, by reports that at times begin to threaten the lives and dignity of people. And arising out of those two reviews were some ways of strengthening the code, and then the suggestions arising in the Press Freedom Commission report that are clearly agreeing with Prof here that clearly self-regulation system in South Africa has not worked, and it's not having teeth, and therefore it's not as effective as it is intended. Then there is the proposal of independent co-regulation. If you then go through that report, clearly there is convergence in terms of independent regulation. There is convergence in terms of the need to strengthen the code, to strengthen the system so that it is effective. There is suggestions that talks to, for example, the question of where it is located so that you move away from the perceptions that arise because it is housed in and with the Media Owners Association. It is funded by the industry, and therefore there could be perceptions. But of course, it does not automatically mean because you are funded by the industry, your independence is threatened. Nevertheless, the best practice is for independent regulation across the board. In my paper, which you will see, there is a lot of international reference to and support for independent regulation. From UNESCO, the African Charter for Human Rights, to the World Bank, to ITU, and there is even in respect of ICT, there is a toolkit that is available online, which is ICT Regulation Toolkit. And you will see when you read that toolkit that it talks to a number of protections that are intended to ensure you protect independence. And it talks to a number of ideas in that regard. Therefore, when one is talking about independent regulation, first and foremost, I think we must agree that the objective should be independent regulation. Whether it's, and I agree with Prof, that the so-called self in respect of the new formulation may not necessarily be really self. But I think the key principle should be independent regulation. If it becomes a statutory system. First, we must understand statutory does not automatically mean draconian. No, it doesn't. More so in the South African context. In the South African context, I started by referring you to the laws and the jurisprudence, the judgments that therefore clearly set precedents in terms of avoiding such situations. I envisage if, for example, you were to have an independent body created by statute, I envisage that the premise in that law would be the Constitution, therefore ensuring that no such decision by that body should threaten media freedom, freedom of expression, access to information, and so forth and so forth. I assume that and envisage that if such was to be the future, it will also have the provision that is there in the MDDA Act, where it clearly says the agency should not interfere with editorial content. So editorial independence is protected. I envisage that if such was to be the future, it would ensure that there is no pre-publication censorship, and all the noble principles that will protect independence will be enshrined in that law, and all what that law would do is to then create a system which, in my view, should either complement the existing and strengthen it, rather than replacing it, so that then it becomes kind of an appeal a body when you are not satisfied with the outcomes of the existing system. Or, of course, if then it becomes the system, that it must still be intended to be a system that strengthens the existing system in terms of adherence to those noble principles that are in the press code. So therefore, at the end, one is arguing that key is independent regulation. Two, that statutory does not mean draconian, therefore the system could be created by law. And this, I think, we need to be able to, when we decide on this finally, because I think what will happen is the discussions in South Africa will take the Press Freedom Commission report to a discussion in a public fora like Parliament, and then ideas will be shaped through that process. But the key is that whatever the outcome of that process, it must be within the framework of our Constitution, and should not therefore threaten our own media freedom, as some people are suggesting. But also, finally, that as we discussed that, we need to because the Press Freedom Commission did not exhaust the question of funding. But for an independent system, and these judgments that I'm referring to, they do refer to that. Beside administrative independence, there's also financial independence and all those kind of principles that protects independence. And also internationally, those are referred to. So if we say the industry funds that independent body, it must be very clear the wall between the funders and the work and decision making of that body. If they can't, I believe that there must be a mixed funding model. And if public funds are a path to also receive money from, unfortunately, therefore, you'll have to create a law that will enable that funding to be used, and it will have to be used in terms of the use of public funds as prescribed by our laws in South Africa. So that's my submission. Thank you.
Mr. Rentaro, 2 minutes, and then we should have about 40 minutes for questions from the floor.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Thanks to Raymond for standing in. But I think we must just be clear about two things. The first one is if there are issues, and I appreciate Lumko's history and Lumko's expertise, but if there's a problem with the quality of journalism, then we must talk about those problems. I don't know if Roman would have touched on research that we know that in countries around the world where there is no self-regulation there's a clear correlation between that and the lack of democracy. And if we were to take what the speakers were saying this morning in the internet safety sessions to heart and looking at the growth and the role of the media, it is very clear to us that we should be moving in the direction of freeing up the media instead of going in the opposite direction. However, I think it will also be fair to say that this debate that we've had in South Africa has been very good for the media, I think. Very good in the sense that it forced even us ourselves to have a look at our own systems, our own ethical conduct or misconduct. It forced us to have a look at the ombudsman system. It forced us to have a look at the press council. And indeed, the PFC process came as a result of that focus on ourselves. And I think the outcome, the approach and the outcome of the Press Freedom Commission, I think has to a large extent addressed a lot of the issues that people like Comrade Lumko would have raised, and it actually, in my view, has softened to a large extent the hardened attitude that were coming out of the ANC and Polokwane. Yes, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of whether or not we, the media, win. By win, I'm referring to the ANC deciding that, look, let's let self-regulation continue because it's the right thing to do, and stop being nervous about the media, because the media at the moment will probably be the only thing that the ANC doesn't control. So what you don't control, you are nervous around. And what Lumko is talking about, the constitutional provisions that he's talking about, and I referred earlier on to his own history. You know, this is a man who many years ago fought for the freedom of the media, and I can't sit here and believe that he wants to restrict or even manage that freedom. So I'm sure that at some point cool heads will prevail and the ANC will allow us to be free. But I think what we shouldn't lose is that important debate that has happened between now and October last year, which led to the formation of the Press Freedom Commission. Because yes, there were issues that needed to be raised, issues of ethics and whether self-regulation worked, whether the appeal mechanisms worked. But did we need a threat of media tribunals regulation to do that? Maybe we did, but I don't think so. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. I think we will take the first 3 questions. Give it back to our panelists. We'll start with the next set of questions. So, one hand at the back. Before you start, can you just briefly, 2 sentences introduce yourself?
My name is Alan Lawa from Tanzania. We're working with the Media Council of Tanzania. It's very unfortunate self-regulation is not working in South Africa, but it's working well in Tanzania. That's why the South African Commission for Press Freedom sent a delegation there. We are of the view why the Media Council of Tanzania is working. It's because the constituencies, that's the stakeholders, the media practitioners, have subscribed to the council through arbitration. And I'm telling you, we have two cases or 2 complaints filed by prime ministers of different periods. They are also coming to the press council to the council for arbitration services. But self-regulation, we stand for self-regulation because we believe is not acceptable to criminalize failure to balance a story. We have bad laws in Tanzania where a minister can ban a paper for failing to balance a story. That's to criminalize. These are professional misconduct. Such acts should be taken to the professional body. And one good thing is that journalists all over the country subscribe to it. We have a compliance of 98% of all complaints filed. Government officials also avoid going to the courts because the courts, you know, it takes so long to conclude a case and it's so costly. So let's allow the media practitioners, the media stakeholders to subscribe to the self-regulation councils. It will tick. The composition of the ethics committee, which sit in the arbitration committee, we involve these people not from the media. We have 2 senior editors now, they've ceased practicing. A retired judge is sitting as a chairperson, and the other people, prominent people, and 2 senior reporters, senior journalists who have retired. So, and through this successful story, we have assisted a good number of media councils in several countries. We have given a supporting hand to Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, and my chief executive officer has been shuttling between Dar es Salaam and Rwanda to see how Rwanda they can put their council in order, introduce it. Please, here is a place where you can learn. Come.
Mr. Krono, the Press Ombudsman of South Africa, Professor Duncan.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Joe Trolley. I'm the Press Ombudsman. I won't go into the details of the debate that's been taking place today, but I need to clear a couple of myths that were thrown around. The first one is the suggestion that self-regulation in South Africa has failed. That is not true. In fact, we actually get complaints from the President's office to the various premiers, various cabinet ministers, and we handle them and they are satisfied with our decisions. So the argument that it has failed is not true. The Press Freedom Commission in its report has considered that there is nothing substantially wrong with the system that we have had. Not one is critical of the press freedom, regulation. What they raised was the fact that the perceptions out there had to be addressed, and that is what they are to the myth that standards in journalism have failed. That again is not true. In 2011, we received 255 complaints against the media, the press. The year before, we had 213 complaints. And the year before that, we had 150 complaints. So the number of complaints is increasing somewhat, very sharply, in fact, let me say. But truth of the matter is, you don't look at the number of complaints in a vacuum and you say journalism is going to the dogs. You need to look at the millions of words that the press turns out daily. And you weigh these 255 complaints against those millions of words. And the South African public still relies on the newspapers, their magazines. And that is why every day they go out of their way, pop up money out of their pockets and buy newspapers and buy magazines. We should always look at these things in perspective. The third suggestion was that the reason for this debate was because of non-compliance with the Code of Ethics. Now, if you look at the number of complaints that have been laid in front of the Broadcast Complaints Commission and in front of the Complaints Commission of ICASA, and you look at that number of complaints and you say to yourself, I mean, you can't conclude from that that there is no compliance with the BCCSA code, in the same way as you can't say there is no compliance with our code of ethics. As I say, we need to look at these things with some rational perspective. Thank you, Madam Chair.
My name is Jane Duncan from here, Rhodes University, Highway Africa. And yes, I also participated in the Press Freedom Commission's inquiry and also the Press Council as well. And I've got a particular question for Tawana, because you spoke about, you know, the various models of regulation that are available out there,